So we're going to continue this week using the Wheel of Life as our main symbol, our main theme. And the strapline for my talk is Making Life Real. And we'll be looking at the 6 realms in that context. And recently Dharma City gave a really good talk on the 6 realms of the Wheel of Life, and I'll be focusing on those 6 realms quite a bit today. Hopefully in a way which helps us to use this teaching of the 6 realms in a way that's going to encourage our life to be more in line with the reality. And that's what I'm meaning by making life more real. It's making our life more in line with the way things are. And what the way things are, if it's not immediately obvious what that, well, it won't be immediately obvious what that means, but what it means is in line with the reality which lies beyond clinging to self. So that's what we're aiming to do. And in a way, that's what the whole Buddhist path is about, is aligning our life more and more with a reality that lies beyond self-clinging. Clinging to a self that's assumed to be eternal, unchanging and separate. But we're not going to go into that in any depth today, but just gives you an idea what we're actually meaning by this idea of making life more real, more in line with reality. And what we could say that from one way of looking, we suffer to the extent that our life is not in line with this reality. And we might also say that the deepest level of our being, we are in line with that reality. So if we're not in line with that deep level of our being, there is conflict. And that this is one way of looking at where this sense of unsatisfactoriness comes, is when we're not in line with this deeper level of our being, which is in touch with reality. And we'll be talking quite a bit in terms of dukkha today, which is the Buddhist Pali word, which means something like a sense of unsatisfactoriness. And there's a nice link with etymology here, and dukkha is sometimes likened, a sense of unsatisfactoriness is sometimes likened to having a ill-fitting chariot wheel. This is the. It's maybe a bit apocryphal. It may not be strictly true that this is where it comes from, but it makes a nice image that the dukkha in life, this sense of things sort of bumping along in a somewhat uncomfortable way. So there's a link between dukkha and, via etymology, there's a link to this idea of a bumping along life through, by being on top of this ill-fitting chariot wheel. Life isn't plain sailing. There is some bumpiness. And there's bumpiness to the extent that we're not in line with this reality which lies beyond self-clinging. I'm not particularly going to go into the 4 Noble Truths, but I'm just going to mention a few things which are germane to what I'm talking about today. And you've got the first truth, which basically says it's the truth of unsatisfactoriness, of suffering, of dukkha, sometimes talked in terms of stress. The truth of dukkha or stress. And the Buddha said that for each of the 4 Noble Truths, there's a spiritual task which goes along with that truth. So with the truth of unsatisfactoriness or dukkha, the spiritual task is to know it, is to recognize it, acknowledge it, even understand it to some degree. There's dukkha which is inherent in our experience. We're spending a bit of time talking about that today, and we're talking a bit less about the second noble truth, which is the truth of the origin of unsatisfactoriness, which the Buddha said is craving, a neurotic desire for things not to be as they are. And the spiritual task there is to abandon or let go of this craving. So those are the two tasks which the Buddha laid out for the first two noble truths. So we could say that we're making our life more real, more in line with reality by acknowledging or knowing the sense of unsatisfactoriness in our experience. And we'll be saying a little bit about that today. So just get the ball rolling, and we can get you to split up into small groups of 2s or 3s, leave it up to you. And we'll have just not much more than 5 minutes. And I've got a question for you. Now, this truth of unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, stress, which way you want to take it, is very deep truth. So my question for you to just talk about briefly is, to what extent and in what ways do we see our life, our experience of life, as unsatisfactory? Okay, it's quite a big question, so you're not going to be able to go into it in any great depth. But nevertheless, just have a bit of a start, just talking in 2s or 3s about to what extent do we see our experience of life as unsatisfactory? And maybe there's a subsidiary question, is craving things to be different than they are relevant in relation to that? So I'll ring a bell after between 5 and 10 minutes, so just have a brief chat. So I hope your little chat helped you to start to engage with the theme of the day. Not that I've really said too much about what the theme is. I'd have to say that of all the wheels of life I've seen, this is by far my favourite. So thanks very much, Sadaraj. I think it was a fantastic picture. It's so clear and gives a very good sense of all the different aspects of the wheel of life. So I'm going to say a little bit about what I'm going to do is primarily talk about the different realms and say a little bit about the characteristics of those and trying to relate it to my own personal experience and with some sense about how we might deal with or deal with, probably the best word, with the less desirable qualities of being in the realms. And I'll say a bit about what it means by being in the realms, because we've got 2 ways of understanding these 6 realms. We could see them as effectively separate universes. So this seems to be what the Buddhist cosmology seems to be talking about, although we probably don't have a strong sense of that from where we are at the moment. But we can also understand these 6 realms more metaphorically as aspects of the psychological experience of being human. So we could say that metaphorically we move around these realms on a daily or moment-to-moment kind of basis. Sometimes we'll be more truly human, and other times we might be strongly caught up in craving, where you could say we become something like more of a hungry ghost.
Yashodaka, I just wonder if you want to point out which are the realms for people who haven't come across those.
Yes. So the different realms, they're sort of divided more into upper and lower here. So at the top here, we have this desirable picture of the God realm. So this is where people are basically having a pretty good time. And so the experience is very pleasant in the God realm. Then moving down, we have a realm here called the realm of the Titans, where you have people who are quite aggressive, competitive. You see, they've all seemed to have got weapons, so they're really quite. There's jealousy, envy, suspicion, aggression, wanting to be the centre of things. Power is very important. That might be the realm, in the human realm, of big business. Then this is the human realm here, where we're just having people just living a basic human life, some difficulties, some pleasure, but basically living a reasonably good, healthy human life with its ups and downs, which we'll all be familiar with. Then we've got the animal realm here, a lot driven by fear, and the focus will be on satisfying basic essential needs: food, sleep, procreation. So these are the things which we see predominantly in the animal realm. And if we were to relate that to the human realm, we'd be talking about somebody who's lived on these more sort of basic instincts, basically living a life of basic sensual pleasures without making any attempts to grow and develop. Then we have the most undesirable realm here, which is, well, one of them. This is the hell realm, where there's acute suffering, even insanity, mental breakdown. We might include depression, being caught up in blind hatred. So a very, very undesirable and painful realm. And this one here, with these strange-looking beings here, who've got very small mouths and big bellies with swords sticking out of their bellies. So this is called the realm of the praetors, or the hungry ghosts. So this relates to people, possibly addicts, you might say, who have intense craving, and whatever they do take in actually causes them pain. So hence these fire in the belly, or swords in the stomach. So they can't really take anything in. They're not really truly nourished. So this will relate to humans who are predominantly involved in quite intense craving and can't really be satisfied by what they take in. So that gives you a clue of what the different realms refer to. And I guess if I've got if I've got an agenda today, it's something like helping us to get a sense of these teachings, so that we can actually use, when we look at the wheel of life, it's a little bit like a mirror. This is how Sangharakshita talked about it. He said for him it was like looking into the mirror. So basically you can see yourself to some degree, and at times in the different realms. And you can see yourself in relating to the centre of the wheel, which has greed, symbols for greed, hatred, and delusion, which maybe we can see these poisons at work in our life. And then we're out the second ring, the black and the white path. We've got those descending through unskillful behaviours, and then there are those on the left-hand side who sort of ascending with skillful behaviours. So we might be able to see ourselves in that ring as well. So if I've got a bit of an agenda, it's like helping us to engage with and reflect on this this teaching to the extent that we see this as a bit of a mirror, as like, oh yes, we can see that this has got some relevance and truth in relation to our own life. And what I've found is that when I've really taken this on board, certain realms really grab my attention. And at the moment, it's the animal realm that really grabs my attention. So that seems to point to something about where my developmental edge needs to focus, and maybe that's the case for other people. So once we've really engaged with this model, we might find that certain realms really stand out as being particularly interesting. Then it's up to us to explore why that might be the case. So, saying a little bit about the God realm, I'm just sort of going to be talking around the subject, really, a bit of reflections. And when I was reflecting on this realm, I brought to mind someone who I used to know, who found that he just wasn't able to enjoy his holidays. He would go away on holiday, and he'd always have the thought, it's not going to last, and I have to go back to work. It's all really very miserable. I'm feeling quite depressed. That was what he found, is that he in a way he sort of knew that this, what should have been quite an idyllic sort of holiday to wherever it was, Bahamas or whatever, the thought that it didn't last very long really made it quite difficult for him. So that in a sense he was right, that yes, these pleasant experience doesn't last for long, but he wasn't able to make any positive use of that. In fact, it had a negative effect. Incidentally, I remember lending him a book on meditation about 23 years ago, and I think I'm probably not going to get it back now. Yes, so pleasant experience doesn't last forever, but just thinking about this can be unhelpful. So meditating on this truth in a focused and positive state of mind might be very helpful, though. In the God realm, as it's generally talked about in more traditional text, is the realm of beauty and aesthetics. So it's that's a strong aspect of the God realm experience. You're in touch with a sense of beauty, and the tradition has it that in this realm we have a Buddha who sings the song of impermanence. Because in the God realm, it's said that the being's very long lived, and it's a very strong experience, a strong and beautiful experience. But the gods need to be told that this doesn't last forever. That there's not much sense in the God realm that you need to grow and develop, because things are just pretty fine as they are. So the Buddha needs to present the truth of impermanence in a way which they're going to be able to take on board. It's expressed in the image of the Buddha singing the song of impermanence. And William Blake, in his poem Eternity, writes this, and I thought this was quite a good depiction of singing this song of impermanence, and it goes like this: "He who binds to himself a joy does the winged life destroy. He who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise." So for those at the hard of hearing, I'll say it again. He who binds to himself a joy does the winged life destroy. He who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise. So basically he's inviting us there to yes, there's pleasant experience, there's joy, but we just let it go. We let it be. We let it go. We don't cling to it. And if we start clinging to our lovely experience, then we're not feathering our nest. We're making things more difficult for ourselves. And I think when I was younger, my experience of the God realm would have been related to music. I've been a musician for many 55 years or so, and that was probably where I personally lived in the God realm, at least to some degree, and on a reasonably regular basis. But I think importantly, what we could say is that if we're having a pleasant experience, it's very, very easy to get intoxicated. So we need to bring a level of mindfulness to bear. If we're having a good time, it's quite easy to lose mindfulness. So there's an injunction there to employ mindfulness even when we're having a good time, because that will be in our best interests in the longer term. Yes, we don't want to get intoxicated in relation to positive experience, beautiful experience even. So that's the God realm dispensed with for now. Then moving on to the human realm, and this is probably. Well, hopefully this is where we spend most of our time. I can't speak for everybody, but I'm hoping that that is the case. And the Buddha says a fair bit about the suffering of the human realm, and he says birth is painful, sickness is painful, old age and decay is painful, and death is painful. So these are all things which can be strongly physically painful, but whether they're emotionally painful is down to us, generally speaking. Maybe in terms of mental illness, it may not be so much down to us, but on generally, if we're tolerably psychologically healthy, whether we suffer emotionally when there's sickness, old age and decay and death, it's really down to us. So there's this lovely teaching of the two darts. So the first dart is the sort of like pain and suffering which we can't really avoid. We get ill, we get an injury, for example. And then if we're not careful, we put in the second dart for good measure. And this is what we have control over. This is where Buddhist practice is headed. Buddhist practice is aimed at helping us to not put this second dart into us. And this second dart is a lot to do with the storylines about the future and with mindfulness for the present moment. That's going to help us so that we're much better able to let go of storylines. So if we can just be really present with what's happening, even if it's painful, that's going to be very much in our interests and in terms of spiritually growing and developing. So another thing which the Buddha said about suffering in the human realm, he said, not getting what we want is painful. Being joined with what we dislike is painful. To be separated from what we like is painful. And getting what we don't want is painful. So not getting what we want is painful. Being joined with what we dislike is painful. To be separated from what we like is painful. And getting what we don't like is painful. So all those four things, they relate to likes and dislikes. So one thing we can do, and this is sometimes, quite often talked about, is we need to train ourselves to go beyond our likes and dislikes. So there was a nice example of this. Well, I remember I was talking to somebody who'd been on one particular ordination retreat, and they had a bit of a practice to help them go beyond likes and dislikes. And what they did, and probably not for the entire retreat, was, okay, you're going to eat somebody else's breakfast, which sounds like quite a frightful thing. Although it's probably in practice it's probably not that bad. But I found this quite interesting, because I thought about, well, what if I was to eat somebody else's breakfast? It could be really, really bad. I mean, eating somebody else's porridge, which hasn't got enough sugar in it, hasn't got raisins in it, and maybe it's smarmed and is made really cold with soy milk. It can be a ghastly experience, you know. So that's quite interesting that they used this as something of a training to help them to go beyond likes and dislikes, just eating somebody else's breakfast. And there was also a suggestion of wearing other people's clothes. Again, maybe this could be used in the context of a retreat. That could be quite interesting. Anyway, I wasn't actually on that retreat, but I sort of heard tell of that retreat. It was quite interesting how they thought about practicing going beyond likes and dislikes. And I guess also in terms of going beyond likes and dislikes, patience is going to be quite useful. So really practicing patience. So if there's something which we know we're probably going to have to deal with because of the situation we're in, we can't just try and fix it or just disappear from the situation, although of course that's possible at times. We're going to be, it can be really helpful if we just treat as an exercise in patience. And of course, if we practice that, we'll get better at it. It helps us to go beyond likes and dislikes in that way. And we might choose to do something which is helpful for others, which we find quite difficult to do. But if we do that with patience and with awareness, even if we're finding it difficult and noticing the difficulty, that could be really helpful in helping us going beyond likes and dislikes. And talking about suffering again in the human realm, there's a few things which have been described as concealed suffering. So pleasant experience for us may be tied up with pain for someone else so that we can have our pleasant experience. Something pleasant is tied up with anxiety of losing that very thing. And maybe something pleasant binds us to something unpleasant. They come as a package. You have to deal with the positive as well as the negative, the unpleasant. And conditioned existence doesn't meet the deepest longings of our heart. So these are rather more concealed levels of suffering. So, for example, although I'm not a parent, I'm sure many people find it overall quite a pleasant thing to have a son or a daughter, particularly if you get on well with them. So then you've got the pleasures of seeing them grow up, start to find their way in the world. But then you've got, if they're having a really hard time, the parent can take that really hard and really get them down. So there you've got the pleasure along with the pain in terms of being a parent. So something potentially pleasant binds us to something which is unpleasant. We're related to somebody who we care for, so we can rejoice in their happiness and also may suffer when they have a difficult time. And the body is a good example of something pleasant binding us to something unpleasant. So we can experience quite a lot of pleasure in the body, but also we can suffer in our bodily experience as well. So having a body has these two possibilities. By having a body, we're bound to unpleasant as well as pleasant experience. And again, mindfulness is going to be very helpful in relation to that. And if we can cultivate awareness of the body and also of our emotions, that's going to be really helpful in helping us start to transcend these things. It takes a little bit of practice, but certainly in terms of dealing with difficult emotions, if we can face them with a non-judgmental awareness, just letting them be, not pushing them away, not requiring that they be different, and if we can just be with difficult emotions, then the magic of mindfulness seems to work, and then we can start to transform these difficult experiences. So in that way, we could say we start to get to know difficulty, stress or dukkha more deeply by just being with it, spending time with it, noticing it, not pushing it away. So that's one of the tasks the Buddha set us for the truth of unsatisfactoriness or painfulness. It was we need to know the dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness more deeply. And by just noticing the difficulty with mindfulness, non-judgmental mindfulness and patience, we're really going to help us to grow and develop and transcend those difficulties. So I'm not going to go through all the different realms now. I'll probably leave a few for the second half after we've had a bit of a chat in groups. But I'll say a little bit more about two of the realms before we do a little bit of meditation. So moving on to the animal realm, as I said, this is we can see this as a focus on basic sensual pleasures, relates to food, sleep and sex and sensual indulgence. So in a way we're sort of living a somewhat limited life, and if we were really really acute in our awareness, we will notice that when we live such a limited life, this is painful, as it's in our nature as a human being to grow and develop. And if we're stuck at that level of experience, we're not going to grow and develop. There's something in us which really wants us to be fully ourselves in all its dimensions, and focusing just on the kind of the more, you could say, the lower level of our being. Then we're not going to grow and develop. And that, if we're astute in our awareness, we will notice that to be difficult and painful. There's some degree of conflict involved in that. And this led, when I started to think about the animal realm, this led me to think about an experience I had a while ago, which relates to the animal realm. And we've probably all had this, where we might overindulge food. Overeat because it's just you get a bit intoxicated with this nice meal, and you suddenly find that your digestion has stopped. So that's maybe one occasion where it's a bit animal-like, where I suppose animals sometimes binge, don't they? They have to eat because they don't know where their next meal's coming from. That's not particularly what I want to talk about. I want to talk about chocolate, which is maybe a little bit an unusual subject for a Dharma talk, but nevertheless that's what it is. But I remember going back a few years, I didn't eat much chocolate, but occasionally I would have some. And I remember I had this experience once of having some chocolate in my mouth and wolfing it down, really in quite an animal kind of way. And I was sort of wolfing it down, and I was craving chocolate, even though I already had some. It was just really weird, and it was really seemed to be really unpleasant. It was quite I found it quite a distasteful experience, quite repulsive and animal-like in a way. There's really noticed this strong craving, but it was a really dumb craving, because I already had some. I don't need to crave chocolate, I've already got some in my gob. Anyway, having had this experience of a kind of animalistic kind of craving for chocolate, I didn't touch the stuff for 6 months. And when I came back to chocolate again, all I could do is take a little bit of it and suck it really slowly. And this gave me a nice, long, drawn-out experience of chocolate, much, much better than just wolfing it down, chunks and chunks at a time. So it really helped. So there was something was transformed, at least in my relationship to chocolate. So really noticing the kind of unaesthetic, animalistic kind of craving for it, I found really helpful. And as I say, this led to a change of behaviour over time for me in that respect. So another time when we, well, certainly me personally, and maybe you as well, can experience the animal realm, is when we become rather a passive taker in of sensual experience, like just really scrolling on your phone, or just blobbing out in front of the TV, or just sort of imbibing sort of YouTube videos in a very passive way, which is my choice, my glacier of choice, you could say. So sometimes you might think, oh, I'm quite knackered, I've had quite a long day. All I can do is on a blob in front of the TV, eat some ice cream, and think, well, that's the best I can do at that moment in time. But it may not be, because I think there's a few options which have occurred to me, and these are things which I'm in a way I'm sort of talking to myself now, as well as talking to you, that if we think, oh, I've got no energy left for doing anything better than just blobbing, well, how about don't do that and just sit in a chair, don't do anything at all, and just drink a cup of tea, something like that. That could be a helpful way of keeping us out of the animal realm. And Another thing I've realised that I personally could do more often, this may not necessarily work for you, but something similar might work, is if we're feeling quite depleted, maybe after a week of work or whatever, quite low in energy, then maybe there is something we can do which actually connects us to our energy resources. And for me, this is listening to music in an active rather than a passive way. I mean, being a musician, anyway, I can't take music in a passive way. It's too interesting. And I find that's a really good way of garnering resources. Now that this may be not your energy resource of choice, but maybe there's something that you can do when you're feeling depleted and feel like blobbing. Maybe it's something you can do to contact your resources, and only you will know that. I can't tell you where to go there. So the last realm I want to talk about, before we just have a brief bit of meditation, is the hungry ghost realm. So this is the realm of intense craving, neurotic desire, which is very painful. And what we take in doesn't really satisfy us. When I was thinking about this realm, I remember my first job going back like 25 years. And what always seemed to happen is people get a pay rise, and their first response was to complain. They'd been given more money than they had, and their response was to complain. It wasn't enough. And it struck me, this is quite a praetor-like kind of thing. In a way, you're sort of given something, but it doesn't nourish. It just causes emotional difficulties. It didn't really quite work. So it's like we got the image there of in the praetors. They got these swords in the stomach, or what they eat turns into fire in their belly. So it was a bit like that. You give people more money, and it turns to fire in their belly, and they just start complaining. It doesn't. They're not satisfied by it. So that's one way in which kind of a bit of a praetor mentality might manifest in the human realm. So one thing we might do here, again, is very much revolves around mindfulness, is if we're in a state of craving, just to notice there is craving here and it's painful. But we have to know that in our direct experience to actually start to make inroads into that. And if we bring awareness to craving, we will notice that it is actually a very conditioned thing. It comes and goes. It's not always there. It's very much revolves around what's going on in our mind, where our mind has turned. And if we can bring awareness to that, to the craving when it's arisen, noticing that it's a conditioned phenomenon, then we start to understand dukkha. We start to understand the nature of craving better. So that's all I'm going to say for now. After we've had a discussion in the second half, I'll say just a little bit about the Titan realm and the Hell realm, just to tidy up a few loose ends there. So before we're going to finish off a little bit of meditation in a minute, but just before we do that, I thought I'd just try and tidy things up and just say a tiny bit about the Titan realm and the Hell realm, which I didn't say much about, if anything, in the first half. So yes, so the Titan realm is one which where kind of suspiciousness, jealousy, envy, competitiveness, desire for power, insisting we're at the centre of everything, are very, very prevalent in that kind of realm. At least that kind of defines that realm. And I was just thinking, is there any sense of I haven't got so much experience of this, but I did turn my mind to where there's a hint of envy and competitiveness, and that's been in relation to music, and when you coming across other players who seem to be very gifted, and at least in me, and maybe in other people, there must sometimes be a bit of a sense of comparison, a kind of a form of competitiveness. But what I found to be very helpful to overcome that sense of competitiveness was to rejoice and notice the qualities of these able people. And that seems to, for me, that just really disarmed the sense of enviousness or competitiveness. Little bit of rejoicing in the good qualities of other people seemed to be very, very helpful. Isn't it wonderful that such people exist who have such wonderful qualities? For me, it was the area of music where that seemed to work. That I needed to apply some form of some sort of higher perspective than just plain envy. And the hell realm. So this is the realm of intense suffering, acute mental suffering, nervous frustration, mental breakdown, depression, insanity. These are the kinds of things which one would relate to the hell realm. And all I can, if I have experience of that at all, is when I had a period of depression of years ago, which I wasn't particularly prone to, but it did come upon me at one time. And what I found to be helpful, firstly, one thing to say about the hell realm is we're going to be acutely self-absorbed. So there's no bigger perspective than oneself. We're just everything's about us, and we get really sucked into that kind of experience. So we're absorbed in that, and what I found was very helpful was to get absorbed in writing music, which I can get very absorbed in. So that was one way in which I took the main emphasis of being just dwelling on one's own difficulties in a very self-absorbed kind of way, but absorbing oneself in musical creativity helped a great deal. And also just taking going beyond the kind of the victim position. I remember at the time when I was having difficulty, I was living in a community and it wasn't really working for me very well. So I basically took the step, okay, I'm going to move out of my community. So I was sort of taking the initiative, if you like. And so I was stepping out of the victim into much more of a responsible position, which seemed to be really helpful. And that started to, almost immediately, that evoked a sense of absorption in musical creativity. And a month or so later, I was fine. So that was my experience of going into and coming out of the hell realm. That may or may not resonate with you, but anyway, just sort of just tell you what my experience has been. So just sort of recapping, what I hope that we've been able to do is to hopefully through the lens of the six realms, we can get a slightly clearer idea of where we can go, where our mind can go, where our emotions can go, and it may be that we start to get a sense of certain realms being more relevant to us, and maybe give us a bit more of a steer as to where we might need to focus our attention for spiritual growth. So I think I've said enough now. So we got 15 minutes for a short period of the Metta Bhavana.